Winning Blueprint presents
In the Lab Room.
What's new? In
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Luke. Thank you for joining me. Today, we find out what's new in Oakland. The Oakland Raiders. That's right, the silver and black. Today, we will be talking about what's new in Oakland. And this is courtesy of YouTube subscriber Andre Rios. Andre snuck in, got the Raiders up. And a friendly reminder, if you want to see a particular team up next here in the What's New segment, simply put, all you need to do is put a comment at the bottom of this video. And of course, you gotta be first. That's the key. If you're not first, you can forget about it. Be the first to leave a comment at the bottom of this video stating next and the team that you want to see next. Those are the two phrases I'm looking for. Next and the team. Now you can dress it up, put whatever spin or what kind of flavor you want on it. Doesn't matter to me. But at the end of the day, I need to see the phrase next and the team that you want to see be next in this What's New series. So without any further ado, we're going to talk about the Raiders and what's new in Oakland. And there's a lot of changes in Oakland. And one of my best friends is an Oakland Raiders fan, and we talk all the time about the Raiders. And the thing that I've told him over and over again, and I've told many Raiders fans this same thing, you have to trust the process. That's my new favorite saying. I got it from Mike Mayock, and I love it to death. Trust the process. If you're a Raiders fan, you got to trust Reggie McKenzie blindly. You got to follow him. You got to follow Dennis Allen blindly. You got to trust in whatever they say, whatever they do, whatever moves they make. You got to trust these guys blindly. In Oakland, for too long, there's been too many changes, too many new head coaches, too many new coordinators, too many new players. You got to have some kind of continuity. And in order to do that, you got to trust the process. And so we'll be talking about what's new in Oakland today. But in order to get to what's new, you got to go out with the old. And so we'll start with out with the old in Oakland.
Hey, what should we do with this old stuff? Get rid of it.
So in order to go out with the old, in with the new, whatever the case may be, I need the help of not only my big board behind me, but my handy dandy pointer. I've got both. Let's get to the big board and talk about out with the old in Oakland. And as you look at this list, what a lofty list it is. And if you're an Oakland Raiders fan, this should not surprise you because the Raiders are cleaning house. And again, if you're building this thing from the ground up, if you're starting from the bottom and trying to build this thing the right way into a winner, this is what you got to do. You got to weed out all of the guys that are dead weight, the guys that are making too much money, the guys that are getting up there in age, the guys that aren't as productive as you thought they were going to be for your football team. And so on this list, you'll find plenty of guys who fit that mold. However, also on this list are a few guys that I thought the Raiders should have held on to that could have been core Raiders moving forward. We'll get to all of that on this list as we talk about out with the old with the Raiders. We start with the offensive coordinator, Greg Knapp, no longer in Oakland. He's no longer your play caller, and here's why. Greg Knapp came to Oakland to implement the zone running scheme. The zone blocking run scheme was supposed to be a home run, slam dunk, can't miss proposition in Oakland. One problem, your star running back, Darren McFadden, did not fit in that scheme. He's not a foot in the ground, stick it in the ground and one cut and go type of back. He's a downhill runner, and it did not work in Oakland. And Greg Knapp is a guy that has always been a part of the zone blocking run scheme type of offense. And so that's all he knows. And so he's not good at adjusting to what guys' strengths and weaknesses are. He only knows, hey, this is my scheme. You either fit and conform to it or you're out of there. And so it wasn't going to work in Oakland. The zone blocking run scheme didn't fit your best player. And so, hence, Greg Knapp basically was irrelevant. It didn't make sense. It wasn't a good match. He had to go. And so now we'll talk about the players that are no longer in Oakland. And we start with defensive end Desmond Bryant. To me, here's a guy that you would have loved to have had back. But at the price tag that the Cleveland Browns were willing to pay, you're perfectly fine with Desmond Bryant walking away. This is a guy that I think is starting to get into the prime of his career. And guys like that you feel like have some more upside to their game, you want to hold on to them, especially going into the prime of their career like Desmond Bryant is. But when a team is willing to fork over the type of money the Browns were for Desmond Bryant's services, you just got to let the guy walk away. Simply put, that's what the Raiders did in this situation. Raiders didn't have enough money to compete with the Browns, and even if they did, I highly doubt the Raiders would have spent the kind of money the Browns did to acquire Desmond Bryant. And it wouldn't have been a smart move on the part of the Raiders anyhow. Desmond Bryant, no longer in Oakland. He's now in Cleveland. Hey, he was too rich for your blood. You look at defensive tackle Tommy Kelly. This one is a little bittersweet because Tommy is a core Raider at heart. He's been there for the good. He's seen the bad. And trust me, Tommy Kelly has seen the ugly in Oakland. And you have loved for Tommy to have stuck around and seen this thing through. But Tommy's getting up there in age, and he's at the point of his career where he just wants to win. And so Tommy did the unthinkable. If you're a Raiders fan, you are absolutely disappointed in Tommy Kelly because of the place he decided to go. Not because he left Oakland, but because of where he decided to go. He's sleeping with the enemy in New England, and we all know how Raiders fans feel about the New England Patriots. That's exactly where your good buddy Tommy Kelly now resides, with the Patriots, no longer in Oakland after a nice run with the Raiders. You look at defensive tackle Richard Seymour. Now, this one makes a lot of sense to me because to me right now, for what he is, Richard Seymour is just a name. The production is not what it once was. He can still play football, and at times at a very high level, but he is not the player that he once was. Those knees aren't what they used to be, and I think he's up there in age to the point now where he's a guy that can give you some good snaps, but not enough for the type of money that Richard Seymour still sees himself commanding on the open market. I think he feels like his value is a lot more than what it's worth at this point of his career. And if you're the Raiders, you can't pay for an aging, broken down veteran like Richard Seymour. You got to let that guy walk. If he wanted to come back on the cheap, you'd have Richard Seymour back in an instant. But for what Richard Seymour thinks he deserves to be paid at this point of his career, you can't do it. Richard Seymour no longer in Oakland. You look at defensive end Matt Shaughnessy. This is a guy that should still be in Oakland. There's no excuse. Much like Desmond Bryant, he's going into the prime of his career. Now, unlike Desmond Bryant, he didn't command a huge deal on the free agent market. He signed a very meager deal in Arizona, and he should still be on the Raiders roster. Now, in the Raiders' defense, when this guy was signed, the Raiders were strapped for cash. They didn't have any money to play with at the time. Guys like your safety, Michael Huff, and Darius Hayward-Bay, and Tommy Kelly, and Richard Seymour, all of these guys were still on the roster. And so they were still eating up cap space. But Matt Shaughnessy should have still been a Raider. There's no excuses here. Matt Shaughnessy should still be an Oakland Raider. You look at defensive end Dave Tollefson. And here was a guy that you went out in free agency a year ago and snagged away from the Giants. And you looked at him and you said, hey, in limited duty, this guy was highly productive as a rush in for the New York Football Giants. Why can't he do that with more exposure, more playing time with us? And so you went out, you gave Dave Tollefson a deal, and you said, hey, why don't you come over to Oakland, you'll start, and let's see if you can be a menace coming off the edges. And what you found out was what the Giants were trying to tell you all along, that this guy is highly productive in limited snaps. And you tried to make him something that he wasn't. And ultimately, he wasn't even productive for you in limited duty. And so the Raiders decided to pull the plug on the Dave Tollefson experiment after one season. He's no longer in Oakland. You look at linebacker Aaron Curry. You went out. You gave up a late-round draft selection for a guy that was selected in the top 10 of the NFL draft, hoping to revitalize his career. What you got was the same thing that the Seahawks knew they were giving away. Absolutely nothing. You got Aaron Curry, you got injuries, you got skittish play on the football field, and you got exactly what the Seahawks knew they were giving away. And so, simply put on this one, You took a very calculated risk. It wasn't a big one. It gave up a late round draft pick, hoping to spark something under a guy that you felt like had a lot of potential in this league. What you found out was, simply put, this guy can't stay healthy and isn't what everyone thought he was coming out of Wake Forest. Aaron Curry no longer on your team. He is now in New York with the Giants. You look at linebacker Omar Gaither. Omar Gaither is one of those guys that he's like a magic trick. Hocus pocus. He's on the field. Poof! He's gone. He's on the field, body and spirit. You see the number, you see the jersey, but he's not really there because he's not a factor. He's a guy that is on the field and he disappears. He started 4 games for you last year. Bet you didn't even know that. And for good reason, because Omar Gaither doesn't make plays. He isn't a difference maker. When he's on the field, you hardly even know he's there. You won't miss him now that he's gone. Omar Gaither no longer in Oakland. You look at linebacker Rolando McClain. Rolo. Good old Rolo. What this guy could have been in this league. Unfortunately, his mind, mentally, he's not where he needs to be a productive player in the National Football League. He has to get his life off the field right before he can become a really good football player on the field. And so Rolando McClain left Oakland, was in Baltimore, and then decided to retire. And I think that's the best move for him right now because he needs to figure out what's important in life first. Get your life off the field where it needs to be. Figure out the things that are important to you. Are the guys in your neighborhood that are getting you into trouble that you grew up with, are they more important than you having a livelihood in the National Football League? You got to figure out what's important, what you have to have and what you don't. Got to make some tough decisions. Or as me and my buddy like to call it, he has to make some TDs. He's got to make some tough decisions in his life. Once he does that, I think football will still be here waiting for him. But right now, that's not the case. Rolando McClain was a bad fit in Oakland. He was never the guy you thought he was going to be when you spent that high draft pick on him. And so he's no longer in Oakland. He's no longer in the National Football League for that matter. But I don't think we've seen the last of Rolando McClain in the league, but we've seen the last of Rolando McClain in Oakland. That's for sure. You move on to linebacker Philip Wheeler. You would have loved to have kept Philip Wheeler on your football team. This guy was the best defensive player on your football team in 2012. And it's not for debate. Wherever the football was, Philip Wheeler wasn't too far behind. You knew that every time a play was about to wrap up, at some point you would have seen 50-something flashing to the screen, dreads flying all over the place, and someone coming in and flying around aggressively. And that guy usually was Philip Wheeler. And so you are going to miss that energy, that aggressiveness. And he was a young guy, so he was a guy that you could have built around at the linebacker position. Instead, Philip Wheeler moves on to Miami. He's no longer a Raider. There's really not much you can do about that. So now you look at safety Matt Giordano. And this is a guy that I thought the Raiders did a really good job of salvaging. He was a guy that was a journeyman safety, just bouncing around the league, was with Indianapolis. And I thought that Matt Giordano brought something to your team that is irreplaceable on most NFL rosters. He's depth. Not a guy you want to start per se, but great depth. You know that if you put him in the game, you can trust him to give it everything he's got. He's a core special teamer, and he's bringing that intensity and energy you're looking for out of a safety. And whatever Matt Giordano did, you knew it was going to be aggressive. Now, he wasn't always going to take the best angles. He wasn't always going to make the play on the football. But whatever he did, he was going to do it aggressively. And that's something you got to respect as a fan. And you knew you were getting everything that Matt Giordano had in the tank. And that's a guy that I want on my football team. But the Raiders decided that Matt Giordano wasn't a guy that was a necessity. He's now in St. Louis, no longer on the Oakland Raiders roster. You look at safety Michael Huck. Solid Raider. Problem is, for where you drafted him at number 7, A top 10 player can't be solid. I'm looking for elite when I draft you in the top 10. And that's been one of the problems with the Raiders. If you're going to be a bad team, you might as well draft really good players while you're bad. Be productively bad is what I like to say. If you're going to stink, at least get something in return for being garbage. Well, Michael Huff was solid. But I don't want solid at number 7 in the draft. I want solid at 67, not number 7. And so Michael Huff for me was a guy that you could rely on to play week in and week out, was going to do all the small things right, but wasn't going to make any plays. And I have a problem with that. Solid guy, not a playmaker, not a difference maker. You got to draft better than that. And I think the Raiders said, okay, this is a guy that we feel like has reached his maximum potential. We'd love to have that, but if he's not going to be reasonable with the price tag and he's not a guy that we feel like is a core Raider moving forward, then you move on. And I think that's what the Raiders did here with Michael Huff. He's now in Baltimore. Maybe him being on a winning program, on a team that is good year in and year out, maybe Michael Huff can start to live up to that draft status that he had coming into the league. We'll see. Because I don't think the Raiders ever knew what Michael Huff really was. They had him at corner. They had him at safety. He was a tweener when he came out of Texas. I don't think the Raiders ever really knew what they wanted to do with Michael Huff. Now we'll see how the Baltimore Ravens decide to use him. You look at safety Mike Mitchell. Here's another safety that you drafted. This time, you overdrafted. Mike Mitchell, for a lot of teams, was a 6th-round selection, 5th-round selection. At best, maybe a 4th-round selection. Raiders decided to take this guy in the 2nd round. And again, you know how I feel about this. If it's your guy, get your guy when you feel like you need to get your guy. Well, the Raiders felt the need to pull the trigger on Mike Mitchell in the 2nd round. But throughout his career, he showcased the skills that showed everyone else around the league that he was a 6th-round selection. And so the Raiders, in this case, got what they deserved. Mike Mitchell, no longer on your roster. He ended up being a core special teamer. You don't draft core special teamers in the 2nd round. That's not what we do in the National Football League. And so Mike Mitchell now is in Carolina. Let's see if that new lease on life in Carolina is what he needs to jumpstart his career. You look at cornerback Shante Spencer. For me, never liked the selection when you made this guy a starting corner on your team. Didn't like the signing of this guy. But when you're at the point the Raiders were at when they signed Shante Spencer in 2012, you can't blame them because the Raiders were penny pinching. And they brought in a lot of old stuff, a lot of garbage. They brought in a lot of guys that if you got money, you don't spend it on guys like Shante Spencer. But when you're penny pinching, you got to take table scraps. And that's what Shante Spencer was for me. Table scraps. A guy that you put on your roster to fill it out because you don't have any money to get guys that can be true difference makers. Shante Spencer was past the prime of his career when you got him. And he was injury prone when you got him. And what did you get in Oakland out of Shante Spencer in 2012? A guy that was past his prime and injury prone. So there you have it. Shante Spencer no longer on your roster because now you've got more talented guys, younger guys, and the first to go are the table scrap guys when you start getting new, fresh talent on your football team. And I think Shante Spencer is a guy that needed to be on his way out in Oakland. You look at punter Shane Lechner, another core Raider. Much like Tommy Kelly has been here for a while, has seen a lot in Oakland. You would have loved to have seen Shane stick around, but at the end of the day, all good things must come to an end. Shane Lechler's time in Oakland has come to an end. I will say this, Shane Lechler, at one point in his career, was the best punter in the league. And you can say that about any other Raider player probably for the last 9 or 10 years. That the Raiders have a player at a position as the best in the league. Shane Lechler was it for about a 3-year stretch in the National Football League. And so I think he's still got some football left in him. He's now in Houston, no longer an Oakland Raider. So now we're done with the defensive and special team side of the football. Now let's look at guys who are out with the old in Oakland on the offensive side of football. And the Oakland Raiders got out of the Mike Goodson business just in the nick of time. You got rid of this guy. He's now in New York with the Jets. And the minute you got rid of him is the minute this guy got in trouble. And so if you're the Raiders, good riddance, because you don't need a backup running back making headlines. You don't want anyone making headlines first and foremost, especially negative ones. If you're the Raiders, you don't need any negative press. You've had enough of that over the last decade. You had enough of that with the Rolo situation. You don't want any more of that. Mike Goodson now in New York with the Jets. If you're a Raiders fan, you say, dodge the bullet on that one. You look at guard Cooper Carlisle. I find Cooper Carlisle's tenure in Oakland to be very funny because I felt like I've gotten rid of Cooper Carlisle so many times in Oakland. He's not on your roster. He's back on the roster. He's gone. He's starting again. And so I don't know what to make of this. Cooper Carlisle right now is not on your roster, but for how long? Be serious with me. How long is Cooper Carlisle not going to be a Raider? I expect at some point for the Raiders to have some type of injury, and guess who's going to come knocking on the door? You guessed it, Cooper Carlisle. And guess what? By week 6, guess who's going to be starting at guard for the Oakland Raiders? You guessed it, Cooper Carlisle. So right now, Cooper Carlisle is out in Oakland. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Mr. Carlisle back in Oakland sometime in the near future. Look at wide receiver Derek Hagan. Here's a guy that I thought, if given the opportunity, he could flourish. Well, the Raiders have had this guy on their roster twice. This is his second stint with the Raiders, and it seems like the Raiders just aren't satisfied with what they've gotten out of Derek Hagan. And I thought he was going to be better than what he was when he was drafted out of Arizona State. I feel like if someone gives this guy an opportunity to play for more than one season on their team, he could be a solid contributor to your football team. But no one in the league seems to want to keep this guy on their roster longer than a year. I don't know what it is, but either way, the Raiders decided to do what everyone else in the league has done with Derek Hagan. Give him 1 year and get him out of there. So he's one and done in Oakland. Once again, Derek Hagan no longer on your roster. You look at Darius Hayward-Bay, DHB. And for me, this pick is one of the abominations of late in Raider history because you absolutely reached for this guy. Not only was this guy not a first-round pick, this guy was not a top 10 pick, and you made him both. And so in this case, you got what you deserved. You needed Darius Hayward-Bay to come in and stink it up because you deserved that. And I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back, that made the Raiders front office open their eyes and say, you know what? We can no longer continue to take height, weight, speed specimens in place of guys who can actually play football. We need football players, not height, weight, speed specimens, because those guys don't win you football games. Football players do. And Darius Hayward-Bay came into the league as a guy that wasn't a great route runner, that wasn't a guy that had great hands. His hands were questionable at Maryland. So you knew you were getting a guy that had faults, yet you took him in the top 10 anyway. And the end result was a guy that doesn't make it to his second contract in Oakland. He's now in Indianapolis. Maybe the Indianapolis Colts can get something out of Darius Hayward-Bay because the Oakland Raiders sure did not. You look at quarterback Matt Leinart. This one is quick. He was a career backup. He landed in Oakland. He didn't care enough about football until it was too late. He was given the keys to franchises, wrecked those cars, and now he's going to be out of the league. This was his last stop in Oakland. No one else, unless it's Gary Kubiak and the Houston Texans come calling, no one else is going to give this guy a job. Good riddance to Matt Leinart. He's now going to probably be out of the league, and no one is going to miss him. You look at tight end Brandon Myers. This is a guy that you are going to miss in Oakland. Here's a guy that I thought you should have hung on to. And what happened here was a case of the Raiders just saying, hey, Brandon, go test the free agent market, come back with a number, and then come talk to us. Should have never came down to that. This shouldn't have been one of those situations where you tell a guy, hey, go get a number and come back. Because what happened was that Brandon Myers had a team that really wanted him. He felt wanted, and you know how players are in free agency. I want to feel like I belong. I want to feel like I'm wanted. And the Giants, after losing Martellus Bennett, really wanted Brandon Myers. So, guess what? The Giants extended an offer. Brandon Myers signed his name on the dotted line, and it should not have happened. Here's a guy that no one knew who he was outside of Oakland. Yet, he kept catching passes. He was the safety blanket in Oakland last year. When all else fails, hey, just throw it to Brandon. He'll catch it. And that's what he did over and over and over again. He was your best pass-catching threat last season. He should still be on your roster. I know he's not the most athletic guy. He's not going to catch an 80-yard touchdown pass. But he was solid. He caught the football when you threw it to him. He was tough. He should still be on your roster. He was relatively young. These are the type of pieces you don't let walk away when you're trying to build a winner. But you did. He's now in New York, and there's nothing, again, you can do about it. So that is out with the old in Oakland. Now we're going to switch gears to in with the new with the Oakland Raiders.
Hey, where'd you get this from? Oh, yeah, that's brand new.
So you look at the Raiders and what's new in Oakland, and you got to start with offensive coordinator Greg Olsen. Out with the old and Greg Knapp, in with the new with Greg Olsen. Here's a guy that has offensive coordinator experience. He has experience as a play caller in this league. Was once the offensive coordinator in St. Louis as well as in Tampa Bay. So this guy knows what it takes to be a play caller in this league. That responsibility and duty will not overwhelm him. I don't want to get too in-depth with him because we'll talk a lot more about Greg Olsen and his philosophy in the philosophical changes department. But I will say this. Here's a guy that's going to come in and take the sum of his parts and make them work to their strengths. He's not going to try to fit round pegs into square holes. He's going to take what he has and use these guys to their best abilities. And that's a good sign for the Oakland Raiders. So we move on to your players that are now on your football team as offseason acquisitions. And you look at defensive end Vance Walker. I like this pickup. Here's a guy that's young going into the prime of his career. You got him from the Atlanta Falcons. I think the best is yet to come from Vance Walker. And I think he's a guy that can get even better. So I like this move. I like this trade-off. You lose a couple of defensive ends. You replace them with a very talented guy in Vance Walker. Let's see how the Raiders use him in their defensive scheme. You look at defensive tackle Pat Sims. You got this guy from the Cincinnati Bengals. I don't think he's a starter per se. I think he's a solid rotational depth lineman, and that's okay. That's fine. You get this guy, you play him 20 to 25 snaps per game. You get the most out of him, and you keep it moving. Solid signing for the Oakland Raiders. You look at linebacker Kevin Burnett. Really good signing here by the Raiders. What the Raiders are looking to do and what you'll find in this mixture of players that they've signed onto their roster is that they're looking for a good mixture of young players going into the prime of their career and guys who are wily, cagey veterans. Guys who have been around the block, understand what it takes in this league to get it done, because they need guys like Kevin Burnett, who's coming over from Miami, who was with the Dallas Cowboys as a starter in both locations, to come in and really show these guys the ropes. Show these younger players what it means to be a pro in the National Football League. Show them how to get it done in the film room, how to get it done on the practice field, how to translate what you do in practice to the game. And so guys like Kevin Burnett not only are going to be instrumental on the field, but also in the locker room as a vocal leader, as a guy that those younger players can follow. And so Kevin Burnett is a solid player. And not only that, he's going to be a leader on this football team as well. You look at linebacker Jason Hunter. Here's a guy you got from the Denver Broncos. And so solid special teams player. He's going to play a little bit on the defensive side of the football for you at the linebacker position. I think Jason Hunter has a lot of developing to do, but he's a solid linebacker and another guy that's going to help you on the special teams side of the football as well. Linebacker Kaluka Maivia. Here's another guy, much like Kevin Burnett, was a starter in Cleveland, where you got him from. Solid defender. Not going to knock your socks off or blow your doors off with his production, but he's a solid guy that if you put him on the field, guess what? Wherever he's supposed to be, he's going to be there when he's supposed to be there, and he's going to make the play. Now, is he going to go out and get you 3 interceptions? Probably not. Is he going to get you 4 sacks? Again, probably not. But if you stick this guy in the middle of your defense, he's a guy that'll get you 87 to 110 tackles and be where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there. Solid defender in Kaluka Maivia. And you got to fill your roster out with guys like that. You look at linebacker Nick Roach. Again, much like Maivia and Burnett, another solid guy that comes over from the Chicago Bears that was a starter in this league that knows how to get it done. Raiders are looking for players that can help with this young, inexperienced group of players that they have in their locker room. And you need veterans to offset those young guys. And Nick Roach is going to come into your locker room, be a leader, much like Burnett, and is also going to help you on the field at the linebacker position. You look at safety Charles Woodson. Uncle Charles is back in Oakland, the place where he started his career. He left. He went to Green Bay. He did everything on the field that he could do, everything that there was to do in the National Football League, won a Super Bowl, won league MVP on the defensive side of football. Now he's back in Oakland to wrap his career up, and he's got some football left, believe it or not. And so he's a guy that's also going to help you in the locker room and help you on the field as well. Charles Woodson can still play, and I think he's going to help your secondary immensely in 2013. You look at Usama Young. Not really a big fan of this signing because Usama Young for me is a guy that wasn't good enough to play corner. You stick him at safety. That's what the Saints did in New Orleans. And he was okay. He was marginal at best at the safety position, if you ask me. He's a guy that's a little bit more athletic as a safety than he is a cornerback, but I don't think he's a guy that really makes a big difference at the safety position. You may feel different. I just feel like Usama Young is marginal at best, but he adds depth to your safety position. I don't have a problem with that. You look at cornerback Mike Jenkins. Here's a guy that could be a steal for the Raiders because Mike Jenkins was once a Pro Bowl defender in this league. His rookie season in Dallas, he came in with a bang. But injuries and lack of production and playing time as the Dallas Cowboys kind of moved on from Mike Jenkins because they couldn't rely on him, whether it was a hamstring, a toe, or of late, the shoulder. He wasn't playing football. He was on the sidelines. And as a football team, you don't have time for players who aren't playing. And so if you're the Raiders, you're hoping to get the Mike Jenkins that burst onto the NFL landscape and made it to the Pro Bowl in his rookie season, not the guy that was constantly injured and on the shelf for the Dallas Cowboys. If you get the former and not the latter, the Oakland Raiders would have gotten themselves a steal in a very young, productive cornerback in Mike Jenkins. You look at cornerback Tracy Porter. Much like Jenkins, if he's healthy, he's a solid acquisition in addition to your football team. You want the Tracy Porter that was pointing his finger in the air and making the game-sealing interception against the Indianapolis Colts to win the Super Bowl for the New Orleans Saints. You want that guy that was highly productive in New Orleans, not the guy that barely laid a toe on the field for the Denver Broncos a season ago. So much like Mike Jenkins, if you get the guy that was a difference maker early on in his career, then you've gotten a steal in Oakland again. And that's what you're looking for, getting bargain basement deals on guys that can be really good for you. And look, both of these are one-year deals. So if these guys work out for you, you sign them to long-term deals next year. And that's the hope if you're in Oakland as a Raiders fan. You look at punter Chris Kluwe. Here's a guy that's a solid player. Ran his mouth way too much in Minnesota. And the Vikings will tell you, hey, his exploits off the field and him running his mouth had nothing to do with him being exiled out of Minnesota. It was his production. Well, this guy had one of his most productive seasons from a statistical standpoint in 2012, and so I don't think that was the reason. He can still punt is what I'm trying to tell you, and he's a guy that can add value to your football team, he's going to be in a competition with a guy that you really like on your roster right now. Look, he can punt. And so we'll see if Chris Kluwe is going to be on your football team. Let's see if he's learned his lesson from Minnesota, or is he the same guy that was run out of town because he couldn't keep his trap shut? We'll see. So now we move to the offensive side of the football, and offensive tackle Alex Barron. I don't like this selection. I don't like him as a tackle in this league. I don't like him as a backup. I don't like him as a starter. I don't think Alex Barron is a really good player in this league, but look, if you need a guy in a backup capacity, you got to do what you got to do. If Alex Barron is the best you can do, good luck. I don't like Alex Barron. Wide receiver Joshua Cribbs, however, is a guy that can add value to your team. I don't know what he is anymore as a returner. I don't know what he is as a receiver either, but I know this guy still can help someone's football team. And I don't know what capacity the Raiders are looking to use this guy as. Maybe he adds special teams value. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he adds receiver value. Maybe he doesn't. Whatever he does, he's going to add some type of value to your team, because I think Joshua Cribbs is a guy that is a solid locker room player as well as a solid contributor on the field. And he'll find a way to carve out a niche in Oakland. I like this move for the Raiders. You round up the guys that I think are going to make an impact on your team in terms of free agents or trades, with running back Rashard Jennings out of Jacksonville. And here's a guy that I think is solid. Not a game changer, but someone that you put on the field. If you block a play for 4 yards, Rashard Jennings is going to get 4 yards. He's not getting 6. He's not getting 8, just 4 yards. He's a 3 yards in a cloud of dust back, and that's fine. He's an insurance policy for the Darren McFadden Express. And we all know you get on the train, McFadden stops after 6 games and gets off. And if he does that this year, Jennings will be his backup, and you'll feel comfortable moving forward with those two as your primary ball carriers. So that's the portion of In With The New from the Raiders' perspective of guys who they signed in the offseason. Now let's talk about draft picks and undrafted free agent rookies. All right, quick little disclaimer before we get into draft picks. If you're looking for an in-depth breakdown of each one of these players, and you're looking for a thorough breakdown of the 2013 NFL Draft for the Oakland Raiders, I will redirect you to my 2013 NFL Draft wrap-up series. I did one for each team in the league, including the Raiders. If you're looking for a breakdown of these players, I will tell you to go there instead of here, where I will just tell you who the Raiders have selected in the draft. So you look at the draft picks, and these guys, probably 90% of these guys are going to make your roster. Maybe all of them. I don't think every single one of these guys is going to make your roster, but a good majority of these guys are. And you start with cornerback DJ Hayden in the first round. He's definitely making the roster, and you're looking for this guy to really have an impact on your team right away. Menelik Watson, maybe not so much. He might start right away. He might not. But down the line, down the road somewhere, you see Menelik Watson being your right tackle, possibly even your starting left tackle. He's got the potential to move to that left side. We don't know. Linebacker C.O. Moore out of Connecticut. He's a guy that I think can be an immediate impact player for you. We'll see. Quarterback Tyler Wilson out of Arkansas. Tight end Nick Kaza out of Colorado. Running back Latavius Murray in the 6th round. Tight end out of Tennessee, Michael Rivera. And defensive tackle Stacey McGee, all in the 6th round. So you had 4 6th-round selections, and you round up your draft with 2 7th-rounders in the form of wide receiver Bryce Butler and defensive end David Bass. So those are all guys that have a very good shot at making this roster for the Oakland Raiders. Now you look at the guys who are long shots to crack this roster. So you look at a guy that I think will have a legitimate shot at making this roster as a undrafted rookie free agent, wide receiver Connor Vernon out of Duke. He was highly sought after as an undrafted rookie free agent, and you guys got your hands on him, and I think he has the ability to be a solid pro in this league. Wide receiver Sam McDuffie out of Rice, wide receiver Greg Jenkins out of Alabama State, running back Deontay Williams out of Cal Polytech, running back Casey Chance out of Baylor. Offensive lineman John Wetzel out of BC. Offensive lineman Lamar Matty out of Youngstown State. Center Andre Robisky out of Western Illinois. Tight end Brian Leinhart out of Benjamin State. Linebacker Billy Boyko out of Lehigh. Safety Sheldon Johnson out of Wisconsin. Safety Mitchell White out of Michigan State. Defensive tackle Kurt Tafa Asu out of Wyoming. Defensive end Eric Harper out of Grambling State. Defensive end Ryan Robinson out of Oklahoma State. And quarterback Matthew McGloin out of Penn State. These are all undrafted free agent rookies that you have on your roster. And right now, there are 17 of them looking and vying for spots on this 53-man roster. Wouldn't surprise me if about 4 or 5 of these guys cracked your roster, as there are a lot of openings on this roster and positions to be had on this Oakland Raiders roster as they're looking to stockpile this team with young, hungry talent. And you get a lot of guys that maybe missed the boat from being drafted but are very talented. Maybe they can crack your roster. So we move from there to philosophical changes in Oakland in the upcoming season.
Hey, you got so many new parts. Anything change around here?
So you look at philosophical changes for the Oakland Raiders in the upcoming season. And let's start on the defensive side of the football. Your head coach, Dennis Allen, is a defensive-minded head coach. And so he cares about the defensive side of the football. He wants to get this side of the football rectified. If nothing else, this team is going to be gritty and hard-nosed on the defensive side of the football. You can win games in this league playing solid defense and getting just enough offense. But the defense has to be up to par to do that. Not saying that's what the Raiders want to do, but your head coach definitely wants a defense that is aggressive, fast, and very, very sound in its principles. Not a lot of mistakes, not a lot of defensive breakdowns. And I think at the end of the season, defensive coordinator Jason Tarver, who was in his first year as a defensive coordinator, started to get his feet wet. He started to become comfortable being a defensive coordinator. And your head coach, Dennis Allen, saw that. And he realizes that, hey, this is my first time as a head coach. This is your first time as a defensive coordinator. We're all in this together. We're all learning on the fly. And he saw that Jason Tarver was becoming more comfortable as your defensive coordinator. Now, what I do think is going to be a change in philosophy in the 2013 season for the Raiders on the defensive side of football is that I think the Raiders' base defense will be a 3-4 defense. A little bit of a change from your base defense being a 4-3 defense. Last year, we saw a lot of changes in scheme. And schematically, we know the Raiders have always been a man-to-man defense that didn't blitz a lot. They played a lot of zero coverage, and they relied on guys being able to hold up on the back end. Well, last year, we saw a lot of changes in scheme. A lot of zone blitzing, a lot of different types of zone coverages, things that you were unfamiliar with in Oakland over the years because we know Al Davis loved to play the man-to-man coverage. Well, last year you kind of flipped the script a little bit, did a little bit of zone, did a little bit of blitzing. It worked, especially in the latter half of the season when the Raiders started to play better defense. And Jason Tarver started to become comfortable as a defensive coordinator. And so I think the Raiders might be switching to more of a 3-4 defense. And I think they've started to get the personnel that will allow them to do that. And if that is in fact the case, don't expect the Raiders to exclusively play 3-4 defense. They're going to play some 3-4, some 4-3 still, nickel, dime packages. You're going to see the works. But I think you'll see more emphasis on the 3-4 defense in 2013. I'm not sure about that. Don't quote me on that. But I believe that the Raiders are looking to make that switch. And remember, your head coach, Dennis Allen, came from Denver, where they played a 3-4 defense. It was a hybrid defense that could transform into a 4-3 defense with a guy like Von Miller standing up and then putting his hand in the ground. And so you didn't really know what you were getting. But I think that's the kind of look that he's going to be going for moving forward in Oakland. That 3-4 defense that can transform into a 4-3 defense and kind of be a balanced defense in that sense. So look for the Raiders to be a little bit different on the defensive side of football. Now, you go over to the offensive side of football, and it's new all over. You start with new offensive coordinator, Greg Olsen, who took over for Greg Knapp. And I think that your new offensive coordinator, Greg Olsen, is going to do some things in Oakland to really try to jumpstart this offense. And the first thing he's going to do, and the first thing that you're going to notice, is that there will be no more zone blocking run scheme. There will be none of that in Oakland moving forward. He's a guy that classifies himself as a gap scheme type of offensive coordinator. And what he means by that is he wants offensive linemen to control their gap. Block the man in front of you. He wants to go north and south. And we all know that Darren McFadden is more productive as a runner going north and south. And that's what Greg Olsen's first initiative in Oakland is to do. Get Darren McFadden back on track. Because the last time the Raiders were relevant and should have been in the playoffs, you should have won the AFC West. The year you went 8-8, I believe it was 2010, the Raiders were dominant running the football. You remember, you went into Denver and you smacked the Broncos around. You put 59 points, I believe it was, on their head, and you ran the football down their throat, over 300 yards rushing in that game. You want to get back to being a dominant running football team. And the way to do that is to get Darren McFadden on track. First, he's got to stay healthy. That's number one. But number two, you got to get him going north and south. That's what your new offensive coordinator, Greg Olsen, is going to look to do. And I think off of that run game, you're going to see a lot of play action fake, a lot of shots down the field. You're going to work the middle of the field a lot more so this year than you did last year. And I think Greg Olsen is going to come in and open things up, but it's going to start with the run game in Oakland. And so look for your offense to look totally different than it did a season ago. And so that is going to be all of the philosophical changes in Oakland. And there are plenty of changes, period, on this roster between the players, coaches, philosophy, a lot of changes in Oakland, but they're building this thing up. And again, I'll leave you with this. Trust the process in Oakland. Trust the process. Listen to Dennis Allen. Follow him blindly. Follow Reggie McKenzie. They will lead you to the promised land. It's a process that takes time to build, but you have to trust the process. And so that is what is new in Oakland.
What's new in